The ultimate goal for this layout was to be something that you could actually show in a live setting, or even in a home setting. So, well, the narrow gauge, narrow minded is something I've heard from a lot of people. So it's something, a little decal that I put up, and I actually made some shirts for this when I decided to build this layout. And so when I did this, like I mentioned earlier, the ultimate goal was to present it in a way where you can show what you can do with 2-foot narrow gauge in S scale in a short, in a small little design. All the engines, like I said, are converted from HO3 mechanisms. They're all DCC LED, either with Tsunamis or Loke by the good hands of Tom O'Hara. He's pretty much done all of them. And Giving him a lot of hard work to do. It's kind of funny because some of the engines are extremely small. So him trying to fit all this stuff in there and try to make the engines run as well as they do as well, and have the sound and everything is kind of a task for him. The photograph you see really quickly is one that Chris Zygmunt did. Great modeler. If you know Chris, he's not only a great modeler, he's also a great photographer. So he took some photographs for me for this. So the ultimate goal here is just to show you what the layout consists of, how it was designed from pretty much 90% from the beginning to the end, showing you what I use, the lighting that I use, the groundwork that I use, the trees. It's designed in a shadow box effect, John Mackenzie's layout. Red Mountain, when I saw that, it just appealed to me, and I love that design. So that's the ultimate goal that I was looking for when presenting this. This is just a schematic drawing that I did. I wasn't able to find anything online at the time when I did this. Russ has actually told me about a couple places you can go online, but this is basically what the layout looks like. It's 4 foot by 6 foot. It's 56 inches tall. There's 14 inches of view, and it has an 8-inch valance, and it's lighted by 6 CFL 100-watt daylight bulbs. But there's the schematic of it, pretty much. There's a shot of it from one of the ends, one of the engines you got coming across, so you can kind of see what the layout looks like from one end. There's another shot of it. As you can see, it's very compact, it's very small, but what the neat thing about it is what you can put in a 4-foot section. And the nice thing about HO3 mechanism, there's an 18-inch radius, so there's not much of a large area that I need to get to. So the 4 foot by 6 foot was perfectly fitted for this layout. There's a picture of me when me and John actually laid the track. I give so much credit to John. He helped me design the layout. It's his design, the shadow box that you see right there with the backdrop. There's not much track there. So the ultimate goal was to put a lot of scenery in there to fulfill that area. And this is just a picture of what it looked like before I put anything on it. And John helped me with the switches. And that's just a picture of what it looked like before it was moved to the next section. Here it is right now. I had cut out the river. I used pink foam, used regular house caulk. And what I was doing here was just shaping out the area, the landscape of how I wanted to look. The ultimate goal for the layout was to try to present a small town, 2 bridges, a tunnel, the mining, and the sawmill, and try to put all that in a small section. And I was able to do that. There's another view of it from the other side. Again, this is my first layout, so did a lot of military model, a lot of dioramas, but this was a little bit more of a task for me, so it was something that I wasn't used to. So lucky I had the help of John and a few other people to do it. There's just another view right there. One of the nice things really quickly about this view right here is you can see the lighting. The lighting does a really great job, especially when you're looking at it just from afar or even close. Those lights really push out the dynamics of the layout itself, as well as the structures and the ground, which you'll see. There's just another view. Most of the buildings on there are scratch built. Here's an engine, one of the engines prior to me painting. This is a converted HO3 model. It came with both standard gauge and narrow gauge trucks. And if you notice the domes on there, those are all from Jerry Wilson. It has all backhead detail. This is it prior to it actually being DCC'd and painted. Here's just one of the forms that I did. Once I cut out the river, I was looking to make sure that I could get a tunnel in the small space that I had provided at the end. And so what I did is I just built some pink foam and foamed out the sections and actually put the tunnel. The ultimate goal with the tunnel was to make sure that I could actually build it with the wood all the way through it from front to back so you can see through it. There's another view of the tunnel on the other side, just making sure that I had the pink foam to be able to do that. There's another view of it again. As you can see, the panels on the side, the valance up on the top. The ultimate goal for the valance was to hide not only the lighting, but to bring the viewer's eye. That's why the top and the bottom are painted black, so that the viewer's eyes are focused directly on the side, which is the shadow box effect. There's another view of it again. Here's the trestle. Never built a trestle before. I mean, I built trestles before, but never actually went on a layout. When John had told me about building the layout, he said that you'd have to cut each end. So I'm thinking, oh, I've never done that before. And then trying to bring the bridge back into place, it was just something that I wasn't used to as a modeler. So what I did is I actually laid the track, let the flex track go across it. And I eventually took out each tie, replacing it with wood ties, and then replacing it with the bents and the bottom frame end, which you'll see later. There's another view, and you can also see how I built the structure of the foam of the river along it. Again, that's just putting pieces of foam that I constructed, and it would eventually be filled with Sculptamold, which is what I use exclusively. I've been using that for years. That's the groundwork that I use is Sculptamold over the pink foam. There it is. Once the Sculptamold is put in place, I begin to just give it a light painting there, just like a reddish brown, and just filling that in. And I'm putting down the bases for the bents. There's the other side. The top of the trestle is done. And you know, give me your criticism or some help on it. Like I said, I've never done that before, so this is just how I was able to get the trestle to be able to put in place. I'm sure there's other ways, but cutting it out and putting it back in was just something I wasn't ready to do at that time. Here I am just testing the tunnel just to see how wide it's going to be for engines and cars to fit. The cars that I actually have, I have some passenger cars, again, I got from Jerry Wilson, wouldn't fit. So I actually had to make if you look at the tunnel, I actually had to make it 1 inch wide on each side. So it was pretty much close towards the edges. Here it is. If you know me, I paint a lot of things in black, and I do a lot of dry brushing and washes. And so what I did is I painted all the landscape black, and I was trying to get that dark shading color, which we'll see as we move forward in the slides. There's the backdrop that I chose. As you can tell, I'm painting the backdrop, or not the backdrop, below the backdrop. I'm trying to mimic the groundwork towards it. One of the mistakes I made, and I'll quickly tell you, is that the backdrop, when I put it against the backboard, I didn't realize once I put the trees in there that I should have probably raised the backdrop, and I didn't do that. That was a mistake on my part. One that you learn. Like I said, this is a learning process for me, coming from military modeling to model railroading. So in hindsight, I would have raised the backdrop up higher so that you could have seen it, but nothing I can do it once I had all the trees. And John's like, you'd have to remove all the trees, and I wasn't about to do that, so I just left it. There's another view of the other side, again, meeting the backdrop, painting it, trying to mimic the groundwork of the trees of the backdrop. There again, I put the water in, something, again, I made a mistake on. I learned that you should probably put water lastly. I found that out the hard way, finding out that all the work that I did around it got into the water, scratched it up. Luckily, Jim Spice actually helped me with, I guess it's using Mop and Glow. You can actually put it over there. So if you lose the color or the really nice glossiness of your water, you can actually use that and it brings it right back to life. And so it did. So it worked really, really nice. Here I am starting to put the static grass in. I've been using static grass for over 30 years. A lot of guys will use a static grass applicator. I don't use that. I have a unique technique where I use a vacuum and I'm able to pull up all the excess static grass. And so here I am applying the static grass to the ground. Again, these are just views from multiple areas of the static grass that I put down. Here again, I'm starting to put some rock and some of the little bit of the groundwork in and placing that in on top of the static grass and around the areas that'll have a little bit of a rough rock and some soil. As you notice really quickly too, I paint everything black in the bottom. That just gives me a perspective of where things are going to go and how it looks. There's just another view with the lighting with the static grass. And another view again. Again, if you look at the static grass, you can see how the application is. It's sporadic, as grass doesn't grow everywhere. It usually grows where the ground is, especially when the soil is coming down from the side. Here I am now starting to add some of the ballast to the track, some of the wood, some of the little pieces of the chips that'll fall from trees. I'm starting to add that to the layout. Again, if you look at the bottom right corner, you can see some of it's fallen into the water. Again, a mistake on my part where I would do the water last. Here I am now. Once I had the dimensions of where the tunnel was, I started to put the foam in for the tunnel and building up the landscape for that. There's another view of it. Here is the internal part of the tunnel. I wanted it to be all, like wood so you can see through. Some people only do partially. Because it was only 18 inches long, I decided to go ahead and do it all the way. You can see the foam structure around the back and how it's in place. So the foam in the front is actually right against it, which is actually holding it. And the way I use the foam is I use skewers to hold it into the ground, as well as white glue. There's another view of it. And there it is with the top on it. I also designed the top so the top actually comes off so I can actually claim the track. And the hard thing about doing that is trying to mimic it along with the groundwork where you can take it out of place where people can't see where the lines are. I was able to do that, pretty reasonably. So you really can't tell that when you're looking at the layout. There's another view of it, the inside after I ballasted. Here I am putting the Sculpta mold on along with the part of the backdrop on the right corner, and then I also have the backdrop of the tunnel, part of the valance on the bottom part of the layout. Here it is. I'm starting to add colors to it, reds and blacks, adding some yellows to it. So I'm starting to detail the actual rock and the undergrowth. And you can see the backdrop there that actually holds in the piece. It was a little bit difficult trying to get that into place because I was worried about how thin it was towards the end, but the piece that you see in the top right corner is where the backdrop actually holds the top of the tunnel to. So it worked out very well. Here you can see some of the groundwork. I'm actually laying some trees in here just to kind of get a feel for it. These are, ever since I've seen Paul Scholes do the branch by branch, I just was mesmerized by how well he did on his trees. So these are just some of the ones that I did, and some of the trees that I got from John McKenzie. I'm just kind of laying them in there just to kind of see how they fit in with the backdrop and the color. And fortunately, the trees that John did were really, really well balanced with the backdrop. So I was happy with that. There's another view of it. And here again is where I started to pull the trees out, and I'm getting ready to airbrush. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with a lot of military modeling, but most of the military modelers never use static grass with its own color. They always airbrush it. I always put like a darker brown, and then we dry brush colors on it. Just from my personal perspective, it just looks more real. When you see something that's actually painted versus something that's not, there's a more of a lifelike feel to it, the static grass, than there is something that's not painted. So there we are. I'm putting the trees in now. You can see the difference now in the color of the grass. That's all been airbrushed and dry brushed. So the grass looks more of a matte color, more of a realistic. And some of the tones and the whites and the light browns that I put into the rock. And those are the trees now in place with some of the small deciduous trees, which I use super trees for. There's another view right there. Again, there's the view of most of the trees in place. I think there's probably 120 trees on the layout in 4 foot, 6 foot area, which is a lot of trees. When I was talking to John really quickly, he was talking about how to get the trees very closely together. The only drawback to that is I lost a lot of the detail of the groundwork going up to the backdrop, and I actually lost the backdrop for the most part. So again, that was a misfortune on my end. There's just another view of some of the trees. There's another view. So here I am now. What I'm getting ready to do is start to ballast the tracks. I'm actually running some small little log cars to the right. So I'm just trying to figure out what ballast I want to use. And so I was fortunate in Colorado to pick up like 3 different versions of ballast just from all over the state. So this is where I'm actually getting ready to figure out what ballast I'm going to use. There's a view of some of the rock again I put in. I've actually painted some of the rock as well. There's some more views of the rock that I dry brushed and painted. So if you look at the picture there, you can barely see the backdrop now. But again, I did like the way it turned out because the trees are very realistically put together. One of the things that I learned from John too is against the backdrop, you have to cut the back of the trees so they're flush against the backdrop. You really can't see that unless you were to look back there. But the trees are well densed. You could put it any other way. There's one of the scratch built engine houses that I built. Half the structures on there are all scratch built. I wanted something that would give you like of a backwoods kind of a feel to it. And I wanted all the buildings to be lit. So all the buildings actually light up. So there's a view of what it looks like now once it was painted and all the weathering done, the grass put in, the groundwork, the ballast, the building pretty much finished. There's a view of most of the buildings that I have on there. There's a few, it's probably about 85% done. There's like 4 or 5 buildings left I still need to put on there. Again, all the engines are highly converted. All the cars are scratch built, except for the car there in the red car. I think that's the Gilpin tram car that I got from Jerry Wilson. And again, all the pieces of the engines or the domes and everything are all from Jerry Wilson. There's a close-up of the scratch build ditcher that I did. One of the things that I came into realization is that there are no Sn2 cars that would fit that I personally cared for, mostly Sandy River. So most of the cars I had to scratch build or cars that I got from Jerry that I converted. There's a top view of the layout. One of the reasons I left the building open, I did that on the Sawmill, which we'll see in a little bit, is just so you can see the interior of the building, and as well as when I put engines in there or if I store the ditcher in there. There's the mine that I slightly converted. That's a Wild West model. Just love the mine. It fit the perspective of the layout, and I was able to add a little bit of a dock toward the right corner and a stabilizer bin at the top. So that's what's used for the ore cars. All the ore cars, speaking of what Doug had just spoke, are all the Gilpin tram cores that I got from Jerry Wilson. There's another view of the station, some of the small buildings around. Like I said, if the buildings are not scratch built, they're converted or they're slightly converted, and just gives you a perspective of the small little town. There's just a small little scratch built little chain rig that I built up. One of the funny things that I like to do is if I have some things just laying around, I'll just scratch build something and put it in the scene. Like I said, and again, thanks to Russ, a lot of the detail parts that I got, and I got bags of them, are related to what Russ has given me, and I'm able to scratch build and build little side projects like this that fulfill those little areas in the layout. That's just a detailed, I think that's a Design Tech kit. It's resin, just to show you what you can do with the painting with some of the techniques that I use. There's, I believe that's Lizard Head's a building that I just did a slight conversion on. There's the back of the engine house, was just some junk in the back of it. In hindsight, I probably would have put some more, debris and junk in the back, but it's neat to see the a view from it from this perspective. There's a top view from it looking from the back end of the engine house over towards the Elk Creek where it's going across. There's one of the switchbacks. John wanted me to build an elevation on the switchbacks, but I was unfamiliar with doing that, and I didn't feel comfortable with not having somebody around to help me, which is a blessing, especially with you guys. There's so many people to talk to that encourage me to model and to build. But at this point in this layout, I didn't do it. It's a switchback, but it doesn't really go up. It just goes left to right. There's a view from the river coming out of the tunnel at the end of the mill there, of the mine there. There's just a close-up of how dense the trees are. And I took this picture just so you can see the perspective. You can barely see the backdrop on the top. And there's actually 4 rows of trees there, if you can believe it or not. And it's just, again, I like the way it looks, but I think I might have made it a little bit less dense so you could see the backdrop and then raise the backdrop. There's another view of the density and then also the groundwork. Oh, by the way, the track is actually micro engineering. I took out every other tie, a few other ties and things like that, just so you can see it. Here's some of the deciduous trees that I used. Just used the ones from my, I believe it's, what's the name of that company? I lost my train of thought. I'll think of it in a second here. But they're great trees, super trees, that's it. Here it is with one of the scratch-built cabooses that I made. It's the first one that I did. It's, again, an idea that I got from Jerry Wilson from the Gilpin. The cars are converted. Those are actually all white metal cars that I converted to Sn2 using the trucks. In fact, all the trucks that I got are from Jerry Wilson. There's the one of the engines that I did, the Heisler that I converted. Engine runs like a Swiss time watch. Tom O'Hara made these things run absolutely incredible. There's another view of the other side of the switchback, and there's just some little logging cars that I had. There's one of the shays, actually one of the first shays that I did. That actually is a 3-cylinder shay. I actually got that from Jerry Wilson. That's actually a West Side Models kit. And there you can see the ore cars that I got from Jerry. And they kind of fit the scene. There's a close-up of the Heisler. Beautiful little engine, interior light, firebox light, front light, rear light. Everything has keep alive. Everything's LED. They all run absolutely flawless. There's the Climax that I got a picture of it going over Elk Creek. That's a PFM model that was actually converted from a gentleman out, I think, in Oklahoma. And that was actually, the wheels were actually put in. And so that's a beautiful running locomotive as well. Everything has backhead detail too. Just another picture of the engine house. I mentioned to Russ, when I have extra parts, if you look at the little building to the far right, that's just some pieces of wood that I had left. These little coal things I just made up. They're just little things just put on the layout. I don't try to waste anything. That's probably why I got a whole massive supply of supplies in my model room. Digitrax, I use the Zephyr Plus. Got the holders. John McKenzie mentioned to me about actually having some type of protection when you're displaying it, which actually I actually had at one of the shows out in Rockford. And it's got a foot long and it goes around the layout. They're black, and it was a great idea because a lot of people, especially younger children, want to grab and touch things. So I think it's good to actually have some type of protection. Those are just the switches. I actually got those from Jim McSweeney, I believe he's on, and they run absolutely awesome. I think they're 3-way pull switches that I use for the for all my switches. Got to give credit to Mike McKenzie. He did the design for the Elk Creek Lumber and Mining Railroad. He did all my decals, and he does a great job. So if you ever need somebody to do decals for him, he did it. I wanted to make this more personable, and so he was able to come up with a really neat looking design. By the way, all the caboose lights light up too as well. There's just another view. Really quickly with the layout, I was trying to mimic a mixture of 3 things, basically kind of like a West Virginia style railroad that was kind of in the mountains, but I wanted like a little bit of a West Side flavor with the Gilpin, with the dash of Sandy River, which you'll see I have 7 locomotives that are all Sn2. There's another picture of the Climax going across the trestle. These are just back ends, so you can see how the view is from the valance and the black part. It's got the black skirt around it as well. It displays beautifully, actually, and I thank John for that. There's another view. And there's the Sawmill. Had some pictures of it. Russ said it'd be a good idea maybe to do it on another seminar. But like I said, the Sawmill's completely scratch built. Use a mixture of parts of HO parts and parts that I scratch built for the interior. There's another back view of it. There's a picture of one of the caboose that I scratch built. Again, I love the Sandy River and Rangeley Lakes, but I wanted to do something that was kind of a mixture of that and maybe a little bit of West Side. So this is just something that I came up with. There's no specific design on it at all. It's just something that came up in my head. There it is, actually almost finished and painted. Next. There's a 280, that's a C25 West Side models. That's their last version, so it's got the can motor in it. So this is an engine that I'm going to be using on the layout. It's a 280 outside frame. Chris Zigman was able to help me get on the marker lights, the headlight, as well as the dome. The stacks, again, are from Jerry Wilson. The cab is from Jerry Wilson. And what I did is I widened the back of the tender a little bit, but it runs like a Swiss time watch. I mean, even without DCC. I think I have a back view there. I put the marker lights on. Again, this is a freelance railroad, so I have the option of pretty much doing what I want with it. So I like the marker lights. I remember seeing it on an engine, I believe. One of the artists that friends of mine I knew had it on his engine. And I'm just thinking, oh, it'd be kind of neat to put on there. So I decided to have the little marker lights put on the back. So it'll be kind of neat to have those lit up while the engine's running. There's a close-up picture of the Heisler. Again, runs absolutely excellent. There's a picture of the Shea. Very Gilpinish if you look at it. Again, the Elk Creek decals by Mike McKenzie. There's a picture of number 4. Probably my favorite engine. It just runs absolutely flawless. I was at a show in Rockford and I ran this thing for 12 hours straight, that and the Heisler, nonstop pretty much for 2 days, and they ran nonstop flawlessly. I didn't, in fact, nothing actually came off the track. I was actually surprised. So kudos to John for helping me with the track lane. There's one of the 280s that I did a while back. That was actually a C21 that I converted into an Sn2 engine. Again, domes, cab, all from Jerry Wilson, DCC by Tom O'Hara. This was the first engine that I did that was in the Sn3 magazine of the 3-truck Shea. And that was an HO N3 engine from Westside, which I actually got from Jerry. But it shows you what you can do with these things. You're not limited. And there's the train leaving. Scratch-built water tank. The ultimate goal of this layout was to show you what you can do with 2-foot narrow gauge in a small section. And hopefully I've been able to accomplish that and show you guys what you can do with such a small layout. Again, it's only 4 foot by 6 foot. Again, the ultimate goal was to put as much as I could without overwhelming the viewer, and to come up with engines that I just think that are absolutely incredible from a narrow gauge perspective, but from a 2-foot perspective, because they're just not out there. So you unfortunately have to come up with your own designs, come up with your own ideas. And the beautiful thing about it is, and I'll leave you with this, is that it's unlimited. You're not limited to, nothing against Sandy River, it's one of my favorite railroads, or to Gilpin. You're able to freelance and come up with your own ideas. So there you go.
Well, that was just fantastic. It's Jerry here, Warren. I was really impressed with how much extremely well detailed railroading you've got into a really small space. It's 4 by 6, right? 24 square feet. It's hard to believe. You see these pictures. It's just amazing. We've got a number of chat box questions I'd like to deal with.
Sure.
Doug Jolly comments on that the trees are perfect. A number of people asked a question. I understand you're using an airbrush, but what paints do you use when you're painting your static graphs?
Oh, yeah, I use Vallejo paints. I don't know if you're familiar with those. You can use hobby water-based paints that you can get like at like an acrylic paint, but Vallejo paints are one of the paints that I use. And then I also use the Model Masters. I try to stick with an acrylic only because When you're airbrushing it, you don't have to worry about, like the fumes from, like acetone or those kind of things that you're mixing your paint with. But
Right.
I use Vallejos.
Yeah, I've been having good luck with Vallejo paints. Then the pigments are really fine.
Right.
And there's a huge it's almost annoying the large choice of colors they have. You go into the hobby shop and there's rows and rows and rows. Hey, which color do I
Right.
want exactly? But yeah, just amazing. Comment from Bill Hobbs. Thick trees have two virtues. First, they can act as a scenic dividers themselves, and second, they can help mask the transition to a flat backdrop. And I think you've accomplished that.
Oh,
Um,
good point. I never thought of it like that.
Tom Sullivan says airbrushing scenery, including static grass, really brings your modeling to life. It's beautiful. Doug Jolly, same comment on the static grass. Mark Lachey asks, airbrush the static grass? I think we covered that. Tom Sullivan, been watching Night Shift military modeling and Boomer dioramas. Both guys are starting with black and then painting all the scenery later with an airbrush with great results. And
Right.
yeah, that was really interesting that you showed that. There's a guy up here in Canada that paints figures, and he always paints them black, and then builds over on top of that. So his shadowing is already built into the model. It's quite interesting.
That's exactly how I paint my figures.
Yeah, yeah.
It really. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I understand quite a lot of the military modelers do that.
Yeah, a lot of the figure painters that I know from Spain and from Italy, they have that technique. It's a great technique because your shadow's already there, and all you're doing is building up the highlights, so you have the deepest and darkest perspective of the shadow, and then you're just bringing out the highlights. What I wanted to quickly mention is all the engines were actually hand painted. If anybody, I've talked to a lot of people over the years, but everything's been hand painted with a brush. I don't airbrush any of my figures or any of my engines. They're all hand painted with a brush.
Wow, that's impressive results. Mark Lachey asks, did you use a primer on the Design Tech resin kit?
No. Well, yes and no. It's funny he mentions that because I have several airbrushes, but a lot of times if I'm just going to paint something, I know that I'm going to weather it. I actually used a car primer. I used a red car primer that I got from Ace Hardware, and that's the color you see, the base color. And then what I did is I actually weathered that up to give that look, and then the final thing was just some pastels.
Wow. Yeah, Robin comment, there's a lot to learn from military modelers. It sure is. Bill Hobbs, at least where I live, when a cut through the forest has been made, it fills in with smaller trees after just a year or two. So you generally cannot see into the forest. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Oh, Jake asks, how are the turnouts controlled and are they scratch built?
No, the turnouts, yes and no. Okay. The turnouts are all micro engineering, and I use what is that called? Tortoise, and the three-way pulse switch, which I got from Jim McSweeney. The ones on the side of the Sawmill are number 10s. Those were actually done through railroad engineering through what is his name? He did turnouts for a while.
I know who you mean. Yes.
Yeah.
Steve Hatch.
Steve Hatch.
Steve
Yeah.
Hatch. Yes.
Thank
Steve
you.
Hatch. Yes. Yeah. Steve Hatch did those.
And Jim comments, I like the density of the trees. Too many models of coniferous forests are too sparse. That's a really good point. I was up north of the 401, north of Toronto on the weekend, and went for a walk. And the edge of the road is the edge of the road, and you can see about 5 feet into the forest, and it's completely dense. How do you move the layout? You said that you took it to shows. How do you move it?
That's a good question. Actually, the layout itself, the base of the layout, including the backdrop, are one piece. The valance actually comes off. There's actually clips on there that you can actually clip it on. And then initially I had, it was a 10-piece base that John McKenzie had helped me build that came apart in 10 pieces. I was fortunate enough just to happen to, because I collect railroad memorabilia, a gentleman had this, it was 3 foot by 5 feet long, basically aluminum frame that actually was the exact same height as my wood frame, and it had wheels. So
Wow.
I just put it on there, and I can just roll it around now. It's a lot simpler. So
Yeah, that does make it easier. And what's the minimum width? I'm just wondering for my own information, having been involved in moving modules for several years. How do you deal with doorways? Have you got a 30-inch or a 28-inch or something?
it's actually 27.5 inches
Oh,
from the
perfect.
bottom
Okay.
of the layout to the top of the back balance.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I thought about that after I built it in my garage.
Yeah, exactly.
Luckily I had a 32-inch doorway,
Yeah.
and so and as the next mover, what I'll do is we turn it on its side. When, like, for instance, Chris helped me, we were able to put it on a moving dolly, and we were able to just roll it right into his truck. So.
Right. Tom Sullivan. I remembered way back in MR there was an article entitled "What You Can Do in SN2." Do you remember seeing that?
Yeah, actually, I think, didn't Jerry Wilson write that?
Yeah, I don't know. Tom, do you know?
I don't know, Jerry, but it was back a way. It was back a ways. 80s maybe.
Wow.
Maybe. Like I said, he really, when I saw the 2-foot stuff that Jerry did, I was just like mesmerized by it. And so I took a small hiatus from SN3 to SN2, and I was able to build this.
Yeah.
And just kind of went off the deep end for a while, just building all this SN2 stuff.
Dan Stucken comment, I like your mix of bottle brush trees, furnace filter trees, and individual branch trees. They all mix very well. Kudos. Jim Brown says, very stunning work. And Tom O'Hara has a very interesting question, which I'm sure a lot of us are thinking. What's next?
Oh, for me? Well, I mean, as far as SN2 or just in modeling itself?
Oh, whatever. You tell me.
Well, I want to finish up the, I actually have engines you haven't seen yet. I have 4 SN2 engines that I want to finish doing up. I have a 3-foot, I'm sorry, a 3-truck Shay. I have the 280. I have a scratch built rail car that I built. That's 2 foot. And then I also have a small little diesel critter that's an SN2. But after that, I'm actually building an SN3 layout again in the shadow box design. John McKenzie's actually working on it with me to help it. And then one side will be Sargent's, the other side will be Placerville, and then on the ends will be logging. So I'm incorporating all 3 of those.
And similar size to this layout, or a little bit bigger, or?
No, it'll be 6 foot deep. It'll be 6 foot modules, 30 inches deep, 2 feet high, and I think it's like 17 feet long by 6 foot wide. It'll be transportable as well.
Cool. Well, there's something to look forward to. And Ron is asking, can you provide more details on your static grass installation method? You mentioned you don't use an applicator.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that. Jerry, I actually sent Jerry Wilson a video of it, and he actually has that on his webpage of me actually demonstrating it live, so you can actually watch it how I'm actually doing it.
Oh, okay. So great. So if you do a search on YouTube, that may show up. That's great.
Yeah, if you go to Jerry Wilson's YouTube page, he actually has that on there.
Oh, cool.
If anybody wants to email me, I can send them pictures. I actually have videos of the actual layout running, so you can actually see these things actually run, the engine's actually running.
Yeah, you might want to share one of those with Russ, because he can append that to the video when we post it to our site.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be great. Let's see, Model Railroader, July 1964. What you can do in SN2. For that matter, you can do it in any of the smaller gauges. Track plan by E. Winston.
Oh, wow. 1964?
1964, yeah.
I knew it was old. I just didn't know how old.
Yeah, it's getting out there, isn't it? Mark Lewis says, Warren, you really highlight the great virtues of S narrow gauge modeling.
Well, thank you. Well, I thank everybody who's helped me. I mean, like I said, this is something that I would have never endeavored on my own. Luckily, I had a lot of people's shoulders to stand on. So,
I think that's everybody's experience. I mean, everybody I know in the hobby, they've all benefited from the friendships that they've developed over time and the skills of all the people they know. It's just been great. It all rubs off, right?
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, getting a compliment from many of you guys, because I know how great modelers you are, is very encouraging to me.
Well, we've just seen some great stuff tonight. So I want to thank you for taking the time to present to us tonight and share your wonderful railroad. And I know we're going to be hounding you for progress pictures on your new project.
Yeah, absolutely. I will definitely display them.